What are the most popular nymph flies for trout?
There's over 6,000 different nymph patterns on the market today. So to name the top like five, mayflies, caddis flies, stoneflies, midges, and then you're going to have your annelids. Those are still considered in that nymph area, even though it's a worm.
What is nymph fly fishing, and honestly, why is it so effective?
So nymph fly fishing is the technique of fly fishing where you're fishing all of your patterns subsurface. That means underneath the water. If you're dry fly fishing, you're fishing above the water.
What is the difference between nymphing and wet fly fishing?
Technically, wet fly fishing would have been the first stage of nymphing. Wet fly fishing, I think, was technically historically documented in like 2 AD, 200 AD, around there. I'd have to double check that. But then it became very popular in the 1800s in England, where it's kind of a nymph style, but it's more of a swing style. So there's different stages that all the fly taggers are trying to mimic, but nymphing is more specific to a newer style of fly fishing that they're more sitting on the bottom.
Hey guys, Dennis Ventura here, and today we're again with Matt from Drifthook. Matt, how's it going today?
Doing fantastic, Dennis. Thanks for bringing me on once again. I appreciate all these times we get to talk to each other, especially about my
Absolutely,
favorite thing,
absolutely.
fly fishing.
Yeah. I mean, we've already pushed out a couple of episodes out there. I saw on one of them we got some really great feedback, some people asking questions.
Mhm.
So if you're watching this, keep bringing those. We read every single comment, right, Matt? You read every
Yeah,
comment.
respond to them and enjoy talking fly fishing. So please feel
Yeah.
free to reach out in the comments below or email me or give me a call. Love to talk fly fishing. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So today we're going to be diving deep into nymph fly fishing, right? Nymph fly
yes,
fishing.
one of my favorite techniques in the fly fishing realm, I guess you would say. There's many ways to use a fly rod, but this one has been dear to my heart and I love doing it.
Awesome, awesome. So before I jump in, what I want to do is I wanted to ask you about your kind of you look like you're there like a serious workshop. Like
Yeah,
what's going on
this is
there?
kind of my base camp. I'm in our company is based out of Westminster, Colorado. I mean, we work with people all over the world, all over the nation, but this is where all the ideas come to fruition. People say it looks like my I'm living in my mom's basement, but no, it's my wife's. So let's be honest here. It's where I get most of my work done. So
Absolutely. The man cave, the
yeah,
home away from home downstairs where you
yep,
kind of make stuff happen. So yeah, it looks really cool. So so let's go ahead and dive right into some of the questions.
yeah,
Um we're gonna have some beginner questions. So for all of your beginners, this section right here is gonna be for you. I know we had a couple of beginner on our last couple of episodes saying, we love the questions, so we wanted to give you some of those again. So
great. Let's do
um
it.
all right, so let's get started with the first question. What is nymph fly fishing? And honestly, why is it so effective?
Yeah, so nymph fly fishing is the technique of fly fishing where you're fishing all of your patterns subsurface. That means underneath the water. If you're dry fly fishing, you're fishing above the water. The reason we're doing this is not only do our fish always in the water, but in nymphing you want to be as close to the bottom as you can. A trout is going to be sitting anywhere from a foot to foot and a half right below the bottom of the river. So as food's coming in, he's going to be coming up to eat, and that is nymphing.
Okay, awesome, nice. So that's why it's so effective, because they're just really looking for the food. Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
makes sense to me. Question number two: when should you use nymph flies instead of dry flies?
So I always recommend for people to start out nymphing. You're going to have more success with that because 90% of your eating habits from a trout or a fish are going to be underwater. The reason behind this is 90% of the lifespan of those specific insects is underwater. And we'll go into more detail about that later.
All right, cool, cool. And like I said, guys, these are all beginner-friendly questions. So
Mhm.
we're going to be going through these. We have a full list of questions. So these are all just really great for beginners. So, all right. So question number three is going to be which fish species are best caught with nymphs?
So traditionally, everybody thinks of fly fishing and fly fishing for trout. So that's a good place to start. You have rainbow trout, you have brown trout, you have cutthroat trout, you have salmon, you have steelhead, you have char, you have grayling. You can catch whitefish. They're also very effective with smallmouth bass, carp, panfish, and even catfish at times. I have yet to catch one on a fly rod, a catfish, but it's in my bucket list.
So yeah, I mean, I guess this is why nymphing is really popular, right? Because you have a plethora of different species that you could
Right.
get, depending on where you're at in the country. depending on the streams or the rivers,
Mhm.
you could use it for any application. So
Yeah,
really
and
good to
like
know.
in our last episode, we kind of dove into why fly fishing is fun that way. It doesn't You don't have to be in the mountains. You don't have to be you don't have to be near a big river, right? You can be pretty much anywhere and go fly fishing, which makes it exciting for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, yeah. I was actually surprised you said in some of the places like the Northeast,
Mhm.
you could still do fly fishing. So that was interesting to me. So, question number 4: why do trout feed more on nymphs than dry flies?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how 90% of their time they're feeding underwater. Now the reason for that is you take the life cycle of, let's say, a mayfly. Some of them can live up to 2 years underwater before they actually get to that adult stage where they're coming up, making it to the surface, drying off their wings, flying away, going to lay their eggs, and then dying. That spent time in the air as an adult can be 1 to 2 days. Those trout and those fish are going to be seeing a lot more of that subsurface nymphs than they are going to be seeing a dry fly.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And this is going to be question number 5, the last of our beginner questions. What are the most popular nymph flies for trout?
Yeah. So there's over 6,000 different nymph patterns on the market today. So to name the top like five, that'd be a fun video to do. But if we kind of broke it down into categories, we would have to say, obviously, they're going to be doing mayflies, caddis flies, stoneflies, midges, and then you're going to have your annelids. Those are still considered in that nymph area, even though it's a worm, right? So those would be your categories that most of those patterns are trying to mimic.
Yeah, and I think in our last video we went into every single one of those kind of a little bit more
Yeah.
specificity and specifics on it. So
And
anybody
we'll
that's
put
watching this, go check out our the video. We went a little bit we dove into those exactly. So all
Yeah, the
right, let's
one
go
in
into
depth is great.
yeah, absolutely. Let's go into learning the basics. Okay, so these are going to be some learning basic kind of questions. How do you know when a trout takes a nymph?
Yeah, so I guess we got to kind of talk about the setup of your fly rod for a nymphing rig. So on a traditional nymphing setup, we're not talking about European or tight line style. Today we're just going to talk about your traditional setup. You're going to have close to a 9 foot fly rod. You're going to have a floating line. You're going to have a leader. To that leader, you're going to have tippet attached, and to that, you're going to have 2 to 3 flies attached to that. Up your leader, you're going to be adding an indicator. Some people call it a bobber. Some people call it a strike indicator. It's initially a visual cue that you can see that's floating down the water, that if it makes any type of movement, if it slows down, if it speeds up, if it bounces left or right, if that moves, that's when you're going to be setting your fly rod to hook the fish that has hopefully just ate your fly.
Awesome, awesome. So, and then after that, what is the difference between nymphing and wet fly fishing?
Yeah, so technically, wet fly fishing would have been the first stage of nymphing. Wet fly fishing, I think, was technically historically documented in like 2 AD, 200 AD, around there. I'd have to double check that. But then it became very popular in the 1800s in England, where it's kind of a nymph style, but it's more of a swing style. They're throwing the fly into the water, it's going down into the current, and then as the rod comes across, that fly is lifting up. And that actually imitates a not only a nymph stage, but then an emerging stage. So that's what the first wet fly was called. As fly tires progressed, we started designing flies that were more specific to stay low, to not have that emergence. And then they said, hey, how about we do one that does emergence and then kind of sits on the top? So there's different stages that all the fly tires are trying to mimic, but nymphing is more specific to a newer style of fly fishing that they're more sitting on the bottom.
Interesting, awesome, and that's great how it just goes back in time and really, for hunter gatherers, right? That were out there. You could just think of being out there,
No, it's not.
getting.
It's funny. A lot of stuff that fly fishers talk about, like even myself, you think you have a new idea, and then you just look back in history, and you're like, no, someone did that 2,000 years ago. It's just full circle all over again. Which
Yeah,
is neat.
yeah,
The history of fly fishing to me is amazing. So
awesome, awesome. So, do you always need an indicator when nymphing
no,
fishing?
no, you don't. I mean, there's people that do like to tightline nymph. It's a little bit harder with the setup I just described. But if you look at competition nymphing, you look at European style nymphing, they are using just colored line. But if you're starting out, I recommend an indicator. I recommend a clear indicator, something that's not going to be too obtrusive as it's floating down the water. If you have something that's real bright and pink, it's real easy to see, but that might spook the trout away from your fly. So I always recommend something clear, something on the smaller side, but something that you can still pick out on the water.
Okay, great. Let's talk about depth. So, what depth should you fish nymphs?
Yeah, so that comes back to what we were just talking about with my little prop friend here. Those fish are going to be 4 to 12 inches above the bottom of the water, and the reason for this, as water is going over structure, it actually slows down as it's hitting something, right? So water up here is going to be moving a lot faster than water down here. They're able to just sit in there and cruise, and as stuff is bouncing around, they're able to eat it as it comes in. As the summer progresses and as seasons progresses and the water temperature fluctuates, these fish are going to be looking up for those bugs coming up so they can meet and catch. And then as soon as we get the dry flies, the adults, that's when they're seeing the surface and they're actually swimming up to catch that before they go back down to that resting zone.
So, if you have your indicator, kind of understanding that and understanding like the depths that you're at, you have all of that kind of dialed in. How do you control drift when nymph fishing? How do you control drift?
So on this type of beginner technique, the best way of controlling your drift is by weight. There's two ways of getting weight. Weight that's built into the head of the fly. A lot of the new fly patterns nowadays that are coming around are tungsten heads, which are fantastic. They drop like a rock. Or you're going to have to add split shot to your line to actually get that rig down to the bottom. The idea behind this is as soon as your weight comes here, your fly is going to be behind it, and that weight's going to be bouncing off of the bottom, and it's going to be like a natural flow of your flies behind that weight that the fish are going to see. The same idea works if there's weight built into the fly. That's going to sink down first, and most of my rigs that I set up are a 2 to 3 fly setup, and that's going to be bouncing and rolling around, and the other two are going to be floating in behind it. 9 times out of 10, when you're fishing these type of rig setups, that first one is almost like it gets the fish's attention. They see it and they go, I don't know about that. But then they see the other two behind it and they're like, yes, that's the one I want. Usually you're going to get your hit on that second or third fly.
Wow, great. So we've covered some beginner questions.
This
Yeah.
thing's been flying around me.
Speaking of flies, there's one right there. So
there's one right now, the house fly. Must be knowing what we're talking about.
he must be like, I'm interested in fly fishing myself. I'm a fly.
Yeah, I guess. That or just wants to get ate. I don't know. Not by me.
All right, so we covered some beginner questions and some basics. Now let's go into some gear. I know people love talking about gear. It's let's get into the gadgets and all that stuff, right?
Cool.
What rod is the best for nymph fly fishing?
So there's a billion different rods out there in the marketplace. Let's just talk about kind of the size and length. For trout fishing, you're going to have typically a 9-foot to 11-foot rod, and you're going to want that in a 5 or 6 weight. Now, if we're doing European style nymphing, that's going to be a completely different setup. You're looking now at like a 3 weight, and it's going to be around that 10 to 11-foot area. But I always like to tell people start with a 9-foot, and then match your reel in line accordingly.
Okay, so like a 9-foot is a good starting point.
I
So
guess
when it comes to
talk about too before we continue is the action of the rod. People are always asking, what is action? What is the flex? Like, what does this mean? So you have different styles or different actions of fly rods. So if you have a stiff fly rod, it's going to be a little bit harder to get that motion out of the line. If you have one that's too loose, it's going to be kind of whipping, and you might not be able to get distance. So I always kind of recommend to people to do like a medium to fast action fly rod for nymphing. But it's always good to kind of go to a fly shop, say, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Most of the time, they're going to give you 2-3 different rods that you can try out, and you can actually feel as you're casting, like, oh yeah, this feels too loose or this feels too tight. And it's kind of like, picking out your first baseball mitt, it's got to feel right.
Absolutely. You got to get the right fit, and it's going to make you better at getting out there on the water. So, so if you got your rod set up, what fly line should you use for nymphing?
So the setup that we typically do is a floating fly line, and you want to match the weight of your rod. So if you have a 6-weight fly rod and a 6-weight reel, you're going to want a 6-weight line. So just kind of remember, like, if you're picking a number, stick with that number as you go through. The companies have that make these lines, make these rods, make these reels, they balance. They have everything integrated so it balances each other out when you put the rod on, or when you put the line onto the rod, onto the reel, and then onto the rod. So that's a good example. Now, some companies, what they'll do is they'll make a reel that says 5/6, right? So that could fit on a 5-weight or a 6-weight. Same thing goes with like a 2-3. If you have a 3-weight rod, it'll fit on a 3-weight or a 2-weight. That's how you pick those.
Awesome. I mean, we're really giving people kind of a way to set up their rods and their rigs and all of that stuff. We're here. Let's go to the size of the leader. So what size leader is the best for
Yeah.
nymphs?
So with this 5-weight, I should just call this the 5-weight, the fives setup, right? So now you have your 5-weight rod, you have your 5-weight reel, you have your 5-weight line. I typically like a 5X leader to go with that. I typically like that about 9 feet, the same length of your rod. If you got a 10-foot, get a 10-foot leader. And that's a good starting point. There's a ton of companies out there right now that are making pre-built leaders. We do have a lot of great articles on drifthook.com if you want to get into building your own leaders. But the stuff that you get at the store right now, out of the box, it's easy to set up. It can get you fishing faster. So I recommend starting with those.
All right, so we got size set up, right? The 5,
Mhm.
5, 5. Now let's look at length. How long should your
Yeah,
leader be?
I think we just kind of covered that a little bit, but yeah, anywhere to start with, if you have a 9-foot rod, go with 9-foot leader. One thing we didn't cover though is what type of material. So leaders and tippet come in 2 types of material nowadays. You have a fluorocarbon and you have a monofilament. Fluorocarbon is going to be more expensive, but it has more durability and it has less light reflection underwater. So what does that mean? So that means as that line's going into the water, less light can bounce off of it, so it's more invisible to fish. Now, monofilament is great because it floats better on top of water. So most of the time, I'm saying, hey, if you're dry fly fishing, stick with the monofilament. If you're nymphing, go with the fluorocarbon. But that being said, we are adding weight to this rig. We are adding split shot. So if you had a fluorocarbon, that's fine too. Or if you had a monofilament and you add weight to it, that'd be fine too.
All right, so now I guess it makes sense to talk about tippets, right? So what tippet size works best for nymph flies?
Yeah, so tippet is used to extend the length of your leader. You're typically going to be adding, anywhere from 2 to 3 feet on to the end of your leader. And what this does is this extends the life of your leader and also it gives you a little bit more distance. That being said, I always recommend for everybody to have 4X, 5X, and 6X starting out. Here's a little kind of example of what they call a tippet holder. Now, this one has a lot more on it. I have everything from 4X down to 7X. And that's all situational based. 7X is really hard because you're going to break off a lot of flies. Most of the time, I say, hey, you can get away with 5X on most situations.
Okay, awesome. So let's see, we covered, so already in this video, I mean, we're just really giving so much great information here. We covered some beginners, we covered some learning basics, we got some gear, kind of how to set it up. You've coined the phrase now, some like 5x5 kind of
I didn't mean to
gear
do that, but
setup.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, I like that too. That's a
Yeah.
good setup right now. So let's go ahead and talk about techniques. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's talk about some core techniques. So what is the best nymphing technique for trout specifically?
Yeah, so I personally like the rig I was just talking about, but what I'll do after that is I will do a 2-fly setup. A lot of people fish a 3, and it kind of depends on where you live. I know in Canada you can't do more than 1 fly, and there's some people that I've seen that put on like 5 flies. I think it's just a little overkill. A lot of the time too is if you do catch a fish on that top fly, there's so much extra going on that half the time it gets wrapped around that fish, and you have to spend 10 to 15 minutes trying to cut off all those flies so you don't kill the fish. So I kind of stick to a 2-fly setup. The technique for this, I mean, is you're going to go 3/4 upriver, let it sink, and as you're coming down, you're watching that indicator. Any movement, you're going to be setting down river and kind of at a lower stroke. And that is a good starting technique. We have videos at drifthook.com that go into extreme detail on these. So if you want to check out these and see the leader setups and the casting techniques, and where to actually find fish. I think that's the biggest thing for people is they think they can just go out and cast in the middle of the river and they're going to catch something. Doesn't work that way. You got to learn how to read the water, how to figure out where a fish is going to be lying, where a fish is going to be feeding. These are all very important skills to learn before you actually get to the water.
Awesome. And I would say, Matthew, I've known him for many years now. He spent so much time putting together this library of educational videos. Definitely go check out, drifthook.com.
Makes sense.
On there, where is it? On the homepage? How do people get to
Yeah,
that
and on
point?
the homepage there's two tabs. One's called Discover. Just check out the Discover section and you'll find the videos, or you can just search on there for any specific word you're thinking about. Most likely, we're going to have an article with it.
Yeah, and I feel if anybody goes through those videos, they're going to be able to exponentially accelerate kind of
Yeah,
the way they go out on the water because you really I'm saying this again, like you really spent time and passion. It was one of the first things that you did when you set up Drifthook, not only, trying to make the product, but also giving people the education on how to use the product, which, I think is unique. A lot of people out there just selling here, buy it. Whereas like you're really trying to get people to, understand how to use it effectively.
well,
So
thank you, Dennis. I
definitely check
appreciate
that
that.
out. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, man. Um, and I just learned about this dead drift. So, how do you achieve a dead drift when nymph fishing?
So when you hear the term dead drift, people are like, "What does that mean?" A dead drift means it's literally going at the same speed as the current that it's in. So if a fly is going faster than the current that it's in, it's going to look off compared to the natural food sources that are in there. If it's going slower, it's going to look off. So to achieve a dead drift, you're trying to balance out your rig so it is bouncing at the same speed as the water column below. Now here's the tough part. Because the water on top is going fast and the water below is going slower, like how do you know if you're achieving it? An easy way to to see this visually is when you first cast, you're going to see your bobber speeding down the river. And then as soon as your weights hit the bottom, it's going to kind of downshift and slow down. And you can kind of see it now. The water around it is going slightly faster than the actual indicator itself. So that is how you know you're approaching that dead drift zone. Now, as your fly fishing skills advance and you start diving into Euro nymphing, tightline nymphing, mono rigs, all of those things, there's different ways of finding that perfect speed of a dead drift.
Awesome, awesome, great. Yeah, and I just that's one of those pieces of jargon that you get to learn as you're getting into fly fishing. Another one is high stick, right?
Yeah.
So, what is high stick? What does that mean when it comes to nymphing?
It's not a hockey term. It's actually a technique. It's man, I think my dad used to talk about it. He had a buddy in over in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, that would take them up on the frying pan and the roaring fork, and he would go out there with like a 6 to 8 foot rod, a little short rod, and he would literally stand out to the point where it was like a 90 degree, and he would just go behind every pocket of water that he could, so it was a tight connection. His technique was pretty interesting though, is he'd have a pinch indicator every foot down the leader, and that's how he can kind of judge depth. And he actually never touched bottom. He would just go to a specific leader height and follow that until he was starting to get hits from fish. Then he knew, he's like, okay, they're all sitting 2 feet below the surface, and he would just go hole to hole to hole and just pull fish out like nobody's business. So that's what high sticking is. It's really a technique of holding a stick high and catching fish. Not my favorite.
Nice.
It's a little. I'd rather cast than stand there and high stick. But some people like it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think it's also everybody's going to find their technique that's going to work for them based on their style.
Yeah,
And if you get to learn all of these different techniques, then you could pick up and build on your skills. So let's go to something else. Another question that I think we'll probably end up making a whole video on
yeah.
this, but
I think we definitely need to.
what absolutely what is Euro nymphing and how is it different?
Yeah. So Eurythmine is a technique, and there's a few different names for it. If you hear somebody say tight lining or mono rigging or Euro nymphing, it's a style of nymphing technique that utilizes almost no fly line. A typical fly line can float. It's got some diameter to it. A European line is almost flat. There's no heavier into it to give you some turnover. The idea of Euro nymphing is your connection to your bottom fly to your rod is as tight as it can be. So on the rigs that we kind of build, your first fly might be your bouncing fly, but then you have trailing flies. Where a European rig, your bottom fly is your heaviest, and then you have what they call tags. As you go up your leader, you have different flies. The techniques that go into this are very fascinating. It's very successful way of fly fishing, but it's not easy to learn. I mean, I've been dabbling in it for 6 years now, and every time I go out, something comes up where I'm like, this is not as easy if I just had a fly line and I was trying to get to a certain location. But that's what makes it fun, right? It's something different. There's a lot of guys out there that are just amazing at it. They can go out and slay 30 fish a day, to me, sometimes it's more about the experience. But it is a very unique, awesome technique that is used not only recreationally, but in professional fly fishing.
All right, so we covered so many things. We've covered. Let's see, we got some beginner stuff, some learning, the basics, some gear questions. That was really cool. Some techniques. Now we're gonna end it with some improving, how to improve success. At the end of the day, you want to go ahead and improve success. Um, when somebody's out there and they're asking themselves like, why am I not catching fish while I'm nymphing? Well, what will be some of the things or some of the ways that they can improve that?
Yeah, so I have 3 tips for anybody that's out there. Number one, you're most likely fishing in the wrong locations. And this all comes back to reading the waters, what they call it, knowing where a fish is going to be without even seeing the fish. There are specific areas that fish like to be, and I don't want to call trout lazy, but they want the least amount of resistance. But they also need cover. They also need oxygen. So these are all things that, as soon as you kind of have an idea of where these locations are, you're going to improve your success tenfold. Second tip I have is when you're in that location and you say, hey, this is a really fishy spot and I'm not getting any bites whatsoever. Before I swap out a fly, the first thing I do is add more weight. Most of the time, what's happening is you might not be hitting bottom yet. You want to have enough weight on your rig where you're tapping bottom, but you're not getting hung up. So you might be thinking, yeah, I'm down in that strike zone. But really, you've passed the strike zone by the time your line is retrieved back to you. So that'd be my second tip, is add more weight. After you try both of those and still nothing, check your flies. Okay, I've done 20 casts with this setup. Maybe I need to switch up color. Maybe I need to downsize. That's another big one. A lot of people, they're going to be going out there thinking, yeah, the bigger the fly, the bigger the fish. It doesn't work that way. If you go to tricky tailwaters, the smaller the fly, the bigger the fish. So that'd be my third recommendation, is downsize your fly choice.
Okay. All right, so the main things are going to be number one, location, weight, and then check your flies. Those three things are really going to make a difference and improve your success.
3 little tips. I'll
Awesome.
see if I can add more next time.
Okay. All right, so this has been just chock full of information. I mean, we really put a lot of information into this one video. So for anybody watching this, make sure to leave a comment if there's anything that you want us to expand on.
Mhm.
Me and Matthew are putting this out there to help the community, and want to get some feedback from you guys. So anything that you guys want us to cover, we're going to be coming out with some more videos. I think our next video might be about Euro, or what do you think, Matthew?
I think we should go into some rig setups. I think the next time we get here, I'd like to do a little maybe demonstration on what these rigs look like and how to use them. Maybe not
Awesome,
on water
awesome.
techniques, but I can at least show you, hey, this is the knots you want to use. This is the spacing you need. And I think that'd be very helpful. But, let us know down below if you've made it this far in the video, if that's something you'd like to see. I think it'd be helpful for everybody and myself. I enjoy that stuff.
Absolutely. So look out for that video. As always, make sure that if you want to support this content, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can get notified when we upload these. So, Matthew, always a pleasure. Always great learning about this. Thanks
Thanks,
so
Jeremy.
much for your time. And for everybody out there, Have a great time out there fly fishing. Take care.